All right, who's your number one?
Do you know who my number one is?
Uh,
Yes. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Red Essence Games podcast. I'm Nick,
I'm Armon.
and we are game developers as well as lifelong gamers. And in this episode, we have a pretty fun topic for you guys. We are going to be ranking our top 5 villains. So that should be a pretty interesting one. I'm sure Armon and I will have very, very different opinions on this. We've also played some different games as well, so it should be a fun one to dive into. But before we get into that, we are building a video game called Traveler's Refrain, which you can wishlist now on Steam. And Traveler's Refrain is about a musician who travels to a forbidden forest in search of a way to get back to his long-lost love. And what's pretty cool about our game is you actually cast spells with your instrument, because he's a musician. You play your instrument to cast the spells. And a lot of our voice cast is acted by traveling musicians as well. So go check that out on Steam, and let's get right into the podcast. So before we dive into like ranking our villains, I think we should say like what constitutes this list, because I think what we're going to be talking about more is what makes a cool villain to us or an interesting villain, as opposed to like their boss fight. Because like in my opinion, I've played some really, really cool games with very interesting characters, but the boss fight might not be the best, or it's really amazing. So yeah, I think kind of going into more about the villain and their motive, or just their cool factor, should be the way we should rank this one.
Or the nostalgia, maybe.
Or the nostalgia. That's another good one too. Yeah. I should also mention too, when we're talking about our characters, we're not going to go into spoilers, because I know there's some characters on my list from games that I want you to play, so I'm not going to spoil anything for you or the audience.
That's a good point. Don't spoil anything.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if there's some characters. I guess some of these are kind of like, I don't think I'll spoil too much with some of these, but I think mine are more on like the fun video game side of things, where yours are like more serious video games.
Sure. I think that'll make it good though.
Yeah.
So I think what we'll do is just kind of add context for these villains. So also be sure to stick around till the end of the episode, because we're also going to talk about what we think as game developers would make a really awesome villain, like what makes the perfect villain. So let's just dive in. Do you want to go first, or you want me to go first?
Sure. I'll go first. Yeah. I'll
Number
start.
5
Number
first.
5. Okay.
Yeah.
I want to say too that I had a lot of trouble with this, because I kept thinking back and I was like, man, what are like the best villains in my opinion that I played? And a lot of my favorite villains are in like TV shows and movies. And I was like, man, if only I could pick this character, because I feel like I understand this character so well from watching like so many seasons of a show. But
do you think it's just because shows have more time to develop the villains? Because you're playing a video game as the hero typically, right? Whereas in a show, it can kind of cut away to the villain, and like in a video game, that would be a cutscene, right?
Right, exactly. So yeah, in the video game, you just see the villain as, this villain, but you don't necessarily see everything that the villain does in a very minute detail. I mean, some games show you, but some games don't. And then sometimes the villain might do all these things, but they're just not that interesting. So
it's
that's
more just like a
too.
means to an end of, or like an objective to like tackle.
Right.
So I think some of those types of villains, we could do some like honorable mentions after our top 5 lists, and like I think a lot of those types of villains for me will be in that list.
Sure.
So so what's your number 5?
All right, my number 5 here is, I really didn't want to put this character on my list, but I mean I love The Legend of Zelda, so I'm just gonna start off with Ganondorf.
Okay.
And the reason why I was curious, I wasn't sure if I wanted to put Ganondorf on my list, was because I feel like Ganondorf, he's really cool, and like the fact that he's the one male born in the Gerudo like once every 100 years, is a really cool concept. But at the end of the day, I feel like there's not much substance to the character.
Sure.
He's just badass, and especially in like the more recent ones, he's got like all these cool tattoos, and like he's like jacked, and he's just such an iconic video game character and villain. And it's almost like you play a Zelda game, you're like, all right, I'm going to have to face Ganon at the end. And, what is he going to be like? What kind of mechanics? Is it going to be a fun boss fight? Sure. What are all the evil things that Ganon's done? in this game. So I'm gonna put Ganondorf and more specifically Ganondorf because I'm not like a huge fan of Ganon's design. I don't know, the pig. It's cool, but I like Ganondorf himself.
It's almost like they realized later on in the Zelda franchise, like, yeah, he's cool as like a big beast thing, but like we need a more humanistic version of this character. So they're like, oh, Ganondorf, the reincarnation of Ganon or whatever. So yeah, I think that's a good pick. I'm actually surprised he's not higher on your list because I know how much you love Zelda.
Right. But he's not a character that makes me like think. Like I don't go into Ganondorf's head and analyze Ganondorf because Ganondorf's just a villain,
I know, dude. Especially in the newest game in Tears of the Kingdom, I was looking the whole time for like, why is he even doing this stuff in the first place? And I couldn't even find a reason. So yeah, hopefully, and this is something we might talk about in another podcast, but like in a next Zelda game, I think that would be the perfect thing to do is make Ganon more interesting. Like give him more of a reason for being a bad guy.
Yeah, make him more of a villain. Give him like a backstory. Make him have some event in his life that changed him as a character instead of just being born and having this purpose,
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'll put him at my number 5.
Sure. I'm still surprised you didn't put the toe monster from Skyward Sword as your number 5. Because I know how much you love that villain.
One day we'll talk about the worst boss fights we've ever faced, and that'll probably be at the top of my list.
Oh my god! All right, so my number 5 is going to be kind of weird to you, I think, but I love this game. Did you ever play Castlevania, Lords of Shadow? No. Do you know what it like looks like in your head, or do you remember it? It was a PS3.
It's dark, and there's castles and
like bats
red like miasma everywhere.
You got that right.
Yeah.
But okay, so the villain I'm picking is from that. His name is Zobek, and he was voiced by Patrick Stewart, which is really cool. And this is a very old game, so I might be kind of spoiling some stuff, but he's one of those types of villains. Sorry, this is a little bit of a spoiler, but he's one of those types of villains that you start off thinking he's your buddy, and then at the end you're like, oh, he betrayed me, sort of thing. But it's like the reason for him becoming a bad guy and for him trying to lure you into also kind of becoming a bad guy is super interesting. And the implications that he has from the first game going into the next one, the next game kind of sucked in my opinion, but it's just really, really cool. Like, again, there's a lot of my villains like kind of have spoilery sort of stuff. And this is a game that at some point
I had the same dilemma.
I think I think you should play it because it was just sick. So maybe just talking about the game a little bit. I remember back in the day seeing the trailer for this. It said like a Hideo Kojima game, and I was like, what the heck? And I don't know how involved Kojima was in this project, but like I think he was maybe just a producer or something. But even that fact, being like a Metal Gear guy, and also I was like kind of familiar with Castlevania, like the 2D side scroller ones. But this was like really serious and like epic, and like there's like rain falling in the first like scene, and it's one of those games where every single like chapter of the game feels like you're watching a cinematic movie and then ending with like a movie that kind of leads into the next one. But also like the bad guy being voiced by Patrick Stewart, you're like, dude, this is badass. And this was around the time too. I guess it was probably a little bit after, but like X-Men was like really popular and stuff, and Patrick Stewart was on everyone's mind. So the fact that they got him in a Castlevania game, we're just like, what is going on, dude? So
were there a lot of voice lines for him to say?
He was the narrator.
Oh, he was the narrator.
So that's what was. I should have prefaced that. So every chapter starts off with him narrating.
Oh, okay.
Gabriel is the main character, and he's like, and Gabriel felt very lost after his wife died, and blah blah blah, and like in his Patrick Stewart, dude, it's so sick. And this is kind of an aside, but just me being an artist, what was really, really cool about this game was you go into the menu, and it was very like combo based, like almost like Devil May Cry. It was like it was during the time of like peak God of War, peak Devil May Cry. So they're like, we need to have combos and a point system and blah blah blah. But to review your combat skills, it was on like parchment paper, and there was literally 2D frame by frame animation of the character doing his like crazy spells. It was like not something they had to include, but it was like we've talked about in previous podcasts when games include stuff that's like not totally necessary,
Right.
but it's like it's in the game. You're like, whoa, this is just so sick. So yeah, that's my number 5. It's a weird one, but
Wait, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Is Simon in that one?
Simon is not in that one.
What about Richter?
No, they actually like created a new character for the franchise. And
Simon!
I want to spoil it for you so bad, but I probably shouldn't.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's
okay. Don't spoil it.
I won't spoil it. You'll break out the PS3 again one day and,
Can you
play
throw
it.
crosses in it? Like in
yeah. So here's another thing. This is more of a mechanical thing, but speaking of his weapon is a cross that turns into like a chain link whip.
Oh, cool.
So it still has the whip thing.
I see.
And from what I remember, like it gets like attachments and upgrades throughout the game. The game is just, it was like a perfect video game in my opinion. I know a lot of people hated that game, but it's one of the few games that I've gone back to and played the whole thing through like multiple times because I just thought it was so badass.
Right.
So
cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. All right. What's your number 4?
My number 4 is going to be I'm gonna go with Alma Wade from Fear.
Okay.
So Fear
that is not a franchise I've played, so you'll have to tell me a bit.
It's a shooter. And it got introduced, I believe the first game came out on PC and Xbox. And it's basically about this this girl who's born with psychic powers. And her father basically her mom dies when she's born, and her father basically tries to use her psychic powers as part of his experiments.
Got it.
And he keeps like basically forcing her to use her powers, and then by the time she turns like 5 or 6, she's like, I'm gonna basically pretend like I don't have any powers anymore, and hopefully they'll stop experimenting on me. But they didn't stop, and basically they end up like impregnating her like when she gets like a little older.
Jeez.
And apparently like her dad is one of the impregnators too, which is really weird. But it's like the dad and then like the different people that like worked in the facility basically, and they were just trying to like expand her psychic abilities and create more offspring of her that had psychic abilities.
Got it.
So basically you play as one of the characters that is her child, and the other character is actually your half brother.
Okay.
Who has psychic powers, but you don't.
Okay.
So in the story, she's trying to contact you both. And she keeps leaving you these signs, like you keep seeing visions of her, but you don't understand why. And then the brother, basically, his name is Paxton Fettel. He basically like gets taken over by her, I believe, and starts doing all these crazy psychic activities. And it's overall like crazy experience. I mean, you just walk down a hallway and she just like annihilates like an army, like a group of soldiers, and turns them into like blood splatter on the wall, and you're like,
that's
holy
really
crap.
Cool.
Like the settings, especially in Fear 2 is just such a gorgeous game, because like you'll walk down the hallways and it's just like flickering lights and like little apparitions, and then you just see like her standing there, and she's typically portrayed as like nude, but she has like hair covering her like body, so you don't really see anything. But you know, she just like will appear for a second and then like be gone the next time the light flickers.
Oh, that's awesome. I love stuff like that.
Yeah, it's just such a well designed game, like visually, just gorgeous. And you know, going back to the character, she basically is just like this vengeful spirit that's trying to come back and like avenge her. She's trying to like get to her father, basically, destroy this whole like program that he's built. So
that's cool. I love when characters have that deep motive, and it's like, it's almost like she was created to, like, it's like, duh, she's gonna end up being bad if you're doing all this stuff to her, you know. And I have some characters on my list that are sort of similar in that respect as well. So yeah, I think it just in general, what is, and we'll talk about this a little bit more when we talk about like what makes the perfect villain, but it's really cool to see how the villain develops becoming a villain as well, like that whole trajectory. And so like some of this other stuff where you said you're playing as one of the children, like, is that something you find out like early, or is that like something you find out at the end?
To be honest, I didn't really find that out until like I played it like a second time. Or like I did research on it, because the game doesn't really like tell you.
Is it kind of one of those vague stories?
There's a lot of like audio logs that you listen to,
I
and
see.
they basically like give you some context on what's going on.
Yeah.
Then you read like about the experiments, and you kind of start putting pieces of things together. And for some reason, you notice that she doesn't kill you. Like, why isn't she killing me? She's right there.
Oh, I see.
But it's like, it's not her. It's like a echo of her that's trying to lead you to her, basically.
I see.
So yeah,
that's
like
really cool.
Yeah, so
what do you fight in that game? Like, what are you trying to kill?
There are basically the soldiers. They become like, they go crazy because they're around this psychic activity.
I see.
And some of them are actually like, they're there to just capture you. They're part of like the Armacam like soldiers that are coming after you, and a lot. And then there's other monsters, especially in 2. You basically fight like all these ghosts and apparitions and like different monsters that are like spirit linked together, and it's super cool. And in the third one, you could play co-op with you and the brother. And the brother, he can take over bodies and become the soldiers. But the main guy, Point Man, he just has a gun. He's just a shooter. And the brother, he's psychic, and he can go into bodies and like use their guns and stuff.
That's really cool.
It's pretty cool, yeah.
I'll have to play that. Nice. All right, cool. So my number 4, right? Okay, so mine is Virgil from DMC, but specifically from DMC, not from... Did you play that one?
I did, yeah. I actually really like that one.
Dude, okay, that's another one of those ones like Lords of Shadow, where it's like, I've played that game multiple times because I just love the story, and people hated that game, dude. But I liked specifically in that one that they gave Virgil more of a motive. Right. I don't know if you really remember. He was... I
can't remember.
They were kind of like torn between like, you know, we're the demons, but we're more powerful, so we need to like protect the humans from the thing. But Virgil's like, no, we're like superior to the humans. So it starts to turn into that whole like, I'm a superior being kind of thing. And that's when him and Dante start to have more of a quarrel.
I thought they were weren't they like half angel, half demon?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
So it was...
How does that tie in? I forget.
How does that tie in? I don't remember exactly. But it was more so like Dante was wanting to, because there was that human character, a cat. Remember she had the magic spells and stuff like that. She drew in chalk or whatever.
Yeah.
But chat's gonna correct me so many times on this because I played this a while ago. But from what I remember, Dante was like, yeah, we like, you know, this is what we need to use our powers for, to like protect people and stuff. And Virgil was just like, nah, we're like better than these people. So yeah, it starts to turn into this big conflict. And I think specifically about that game as a whole, maybe not so much Virgil, but I liked that the bad guy in it was beyond Virgil. It was like there was this evil corporation. Do you remember this? That was run by demons. And they were like putting some thing in the sodas. It was like sodas that they were selling to the people, right? So it was cool that
very
like
Japanese.
It was very Japanese, but it was just interesting the fact that like they took more real world sort of implications, and they were like, oh, there's actually demons that are you know, behind all of this nefarious stuff that's going on. So that was kind of a cool like little, you know, back end sort of thing.
I was thinking about that like some time ago recently, and I was like, what game was that again with like the evil CEO? Something like that.
There's the big like
the big
guy. And I also really liked Virgil's design in this one. I think he had like the bowler cap on. It was just like very unique. And I liked Virgil in the other Devil May Cries. I actually have played all of the Devil May Cries. But in that one specifically, you felt very intimate with the character, and it was another situation. I know it's kind of tropey, but I think when it's executed correctly, it's cool. When it starts off like he's like, oh, Dante, I'm trying to help you, you're my brother, blah blah blah, but then at the end he's kind of like betrays him sort of thing, or he's like, you know, I don't agree with you, whatever. So yeah, but Virgil is my number 4.
Okay, sweet. It's a good pick. All right, so for me, number 3 is gonna be Archie from Pokemon Sapphire.
Okay.
Did you play that one?
I didn't play that one.
Okay.
Archie, okay.
Okay, so Archie is the leader of Team Aqua.
Okay.
So in Ruby and Sapphire, there was Team Aqua and Team Magma. And Archie was the leader of Team Aqua. And I found his character to be super interesting because his main objective is to basically awaken Kyogre. Kyogre, however you say it. I say Kyogre.
Yeah.
But awaken Kyogre and basically flood the world. So basically, awaken him and have this endless rain come on the planet to basically get rid of all of the land because it's destroying the life. He basically thinks that the actual land is destroying the world. Like humans are populating and destroying everything, and
cool.
In reverse, the Team Magma is like, I want a drought by waking up Groudon to basically get rid of all the water. I honestly don't know the story behind the other one because I didn't really play Ruby, but I know for Sapphire that I thought that was a super cool concept for a villain. Because I feel
the game where the IGN review was like too much water.
Maybe. It might have been, actually, because that's all you do in that game is just swim. But that game was so cool because like there were so many islands you could explore, and like you could just get lost like diving underwater and finding cool places to explore. So nice. The music was amazing. But yeah, going back to villains, I just thought he was a cool villain.
And I'm curious too, because in some of the newer Pokemon games especially, it was like you don't even find out who the villain is till like the very, very, very end of the game. Was this a character that you kind of saw throughout the game, or was it again like you find everything out kind of at the very end?
It's a character you meet like about halfway through the game,
okay,
and then you kind of see more and more as the game nears its end. But you don't understand his true motives at first, and then he tells you them eventually. Because as we know from Final Fantasy VII Remake, when do you know? This is trivia for you. When does the villain tell you all his plans?
Does the villain tell you all his plans?
Yeah. When does he reveal his plans to you?
I don't know.
When he knows he's already won.
Oh yeah.
I got you.
I thought you were talking about.
This kid thinks he's an FF7 nerd. I got him.
That's right. The Don Corneo.
Don Corneo. That's right. You got him.
Oh my god. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. That's a good pick. I need to play those ones. Those ones, it's like I'm one of those people that likes to have the original cartridge. I don't like to emulate if I don't have to. But it's like, dude, getting that game is like $150. So okay. So okay, my number 3, and again, this story was super complicated. So again, chat, correct me if I get some of this stuff wrong, but my number 3 was Thor from God of War Ragnarok.
Okay.
So I know you didn't play that one yet, so I'm not going to really spoil it for you, but I know you played the first God of War. And I don't know if you remember, but you end up killing Thor's sons. Do you remember the two sons you fight?
Magnus and something, right?
Yeah, I forget what their names were. But anyway, what happens there has major implications for the entirety of God of War Ragnarok.
Okay, interesting.
And what's really interesting about Thor, and there's another like major bad guy in this game. I mean, if you know Norse mythology, you could probably guess who that is. But what I think Thor was even more interesting because, again, it's like, I don't know if this is quite a spoiler. It's pretty apparent very early on, but he's almost like a recovering alcoholic. Like he's very much like a trying to get back on his feet.
Like a fallen god kind of.
Yeah, but you know how those games are. It's like they're very like down to earth. So even with Kratos, right? Like he's a god, but you still feel for him because he's like, I lost my wife. I have to raise this boy that I don't know how to raise.
He's still a father, which is what you experience in the first one.
Yeah. So with Thor, it's almost like kind of the opposite of Kratos, where Kratos is seeing this other guy who's like really done stuff wrong, and it's like Kratos has as well, but he's trying to make amends throughout the entire game, which makes him like more of a hero, right? But yeah, the backstory with Thor and what happens to get Thor to the point where he's like a bad guy, let's call it, is a very interesting ride, especially because it spans over 2 games as well.
And you're making me want to play it now,
dude. Oh my god, it was so good. I would say to that in terms of video game stories, Ragnarok surprisingly was even better in my opinion.
You think so? Really?
Better.
You think the second one was better than the first one?
By like a lot.
Wow, really?
Dude,
I thought God of War 1 was incredible.
Me too. That's what's crazy about it. And I was playing it and it was like it's one of those experiences where you're playing the game and you just can't believe your eyes the whole time. You can't believe the things you're seeing. And the end of the game, it's like an emotional roller coaster for like 2 solid hours. Mm-hmm. Like the ending itself is like hours long and you're just like through this swell of like music and fighting and like emotional like dialogue and stuff like that. And dude, it was just absolutely amazing.
Right.
Yeah. So I think Thor is one of the coolest bad guys. And it's such a weird, he's not like really iconic when you think about video game bad guys. But
I think most people don't even consider him a villain.
Yeah.
In like modern day fiction.
Yeah, I definitely in that game would consider him a villain, even though he kind of starts off more friendly. It's like very conflicted because I won't spoil anything.
All right, cool.
But yeah, he was really cool.
Cool. Nice. That's a good pick. All right, my number 2 is gonna be Osman Sadler from Resident Evil 4.
Okay.
And
dude, I need to play that game again. Like I don't even remember who is that character.
He's like the guy who unleashes the Las Plagas.
So is he the little guy?
No, that's what's his face? My brother's gonna kill me. Dang it. Sadler is the tall guy with the robes. And he's basically like he's got like it's kind of like a multicolored like robe, and he turns into the big monster at the end.
I kind of remember, but not really.
He gives you the gift. Oh, I forgot to tell you, we gave you the same gift.
God, I gotta play that again. I gotta play the remake.
You didn't play the remake?
No,
I thought you did.
No, I didn't.
No?
I didn't end up getting.
Oh my gosh! No wonder you're not remembering anything.
Yeah, dude, that came out last year, right?
A year and a half, maybe.
Yeah.
2 years ago, even.
Yeah.
But that actually did come out last year because it was at the Game Awards. But Sadler. So Resident Evil 4 is one of my favorite games of all time. It's like in my top 5.
Yeah. It's a very good game.
And I love the remake. The remake. It's not a remaster. It's a remake. But there was so much charm in the first game that didn't get transferred over to the second one.
Like the cheesy dialogue lines.
Yeah, and like it's those things that kind of made the game memorable, though. In my opinion, it was like those kind of cheesy one-liners that we love doing the voice lines from the game because they're so iconic.
Yeah, and like the terrible voice acting, and like it was in that weird in between time because that was Did it come out on? I think it came out on GameCube first, didn't it?
It did, yeah.
How
in like 2004 or something.
Weird is that to think about, first of all, because it was a PlayStation franchise.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess they had some. I almost
something between Nintendo and Capcom.
Maybe. I'm just trying to think like. When did the DS come out? Because I know that there were some Resident Evil like DS games and stuff, but it was historically like a PlayStation franchise. And then I remember it came out on GameCube, and I think that was one of the first, if not the first, M-rated game I got on 2 discs.
Oh yeah, 2 discs.
Right?
Yeah, that's right. But I like Sadler because going back to him being a villain is he has his own purpose in that he needs to keep up his church and like his rituals to basically keep his he needs to keep the people he under control that he are under him. And he basically turns this entire village into people that worship him and see him as a god. And he basically needs to keep supplying them with whatever they need. And then you come, and he's like, there's also like a political motive where he takes the president's daughter and he uses her as hostage. And then he's basically injects her with this, with the Las Plagas. And the Las Plagas is basically like this insect, or it's like this parasite that goes inside you and infects you, and then you can infect others. So he was hoping to like infect her and then send her back to the president, and it would just spread throughout like the US government or something like that. So there's that, and he's just a bad dude,
Yeah.
So I like his aesthetic as like a character.
Yeah.
And they keep his body revealed. Sorry, like concealed a lot of the time, so you don't really know like what he looks like under. Yeah. But like he gets this like arm that like kills people. That you don't really see until he like opens his robe or like it just comes out from under his robe.
So. Nice. Yeah, that's a cool one. Yeah, I don't. Man, Resident Evil villains are like kind of weird. They're very It's always about like, oh, I want to spread the virus or whatever. But that one specifically is a bit more interesting, I think, just because of the whole capturing.
Plus Leon is in it.
Yeah, dude, Leon.
So Leon.
Yeah.
That's our favorite name, right?
Yep, it is. All right, so my number 2, again, this one is like I gotta like talk around it to not reveal spoilers, but it's the Shadow Lord from Nier, the first Nier. Okay. And that's another one. They have the remaster, so you got to play that now at some point because that story is like in my top 3 of like favorite stories of all time. And I think actually now looking at this list, I think it's actually the bad guys are directly correlated with some of my favorite video games of all time. But what's okay, how do I want to explain this character without like so I'll explain that the intention of the Shadow Lord is to protect something very dear to him, and you do not understand what is going on in that entire game or what the motives of anything is until the very end of the game. And you'd think sometimes like it's kind of like lame, but what's so cool in the entire game is you're led to think in one very specific direction and you believe it because you're believing everything that's being told to you. And then the entire story just gets totally flipped on its head at the end of the game. And what I love so much about the Nier games and Drakengard and all the Yoko Taro stuff is they have those very, very deep messages where it just kind of makes you sit back and think like, what is happening?
Yeah,
there's
either
like
that or it's just so obscure that you're like, what is even
happening? Yeah. But he always has like these really huge like messages going on in his games, and the motive of the Shadow Lord is sort of to resolve what has happened in the world in general. So it's like the Shadow Lord kind of has a good intention, but you don't know what the intention is until you kind of get to the very, very end. So yeah, unfortunately that's one I can't talk too much about, or else it's like major spoilers. But it's that's one that everybody should play. Good one.
Nier.
Yeah.
You're a Yoko Taro fanboy.
Dude, I love well, you like Drakengard?
Oh yeah, I love Drakengard.
Yeah.
I only played the first one though.
That's probably the only one you need to play.
Yeah, the first one was fun. I mean, it wasn't fun, but
it was fun at the time.
At the time.
If you go back and play that game, you're like, oh man, this is a slog. But what's cool about the Nier Replicant, it's almost a remake as well, but like they made the combat feel much more like Nier Automata, so it's a lot more flashy. It's not like a slog to play through. The original was very like, I don't know, it was a PS3 game that kind of felt like it played like a PS2 game kind of, but just the world and the story in general are just so enthralling. So yeah, before we get to our number ones, I think what we should maybe talk about quickly is how the villain or lack thereof in our game is like, what, without revealing anything.
Right.
I think we were kind of thinking about this as we were writing down our lists, and we're essentially developing a video game with not a very clear bad guy at the end of the day. And I've kind of like offhandedly like written stories throughout my life, and I find myself weirdly not even writing a true like bad guy into the game or into the story in general. And I don't know what that's about. I'm like trying to again analyze myself a little bit.
I think you like to leave people to interpret things, and that's probably why you do that, because first of all, I think you just don't like tropey stuff to begin with. That's the generic tropey bad guy. Like I feel like you
I'm gonna take over the world. Kind of thing.
I feel like I mean you really like characters with a lot of story to them or like nuance.
Mhm.
So I think that's why you probably don't write characters. And also they're kind of like, once they're there. There's not really much
Sure.
to them. But for you, I feel like you, in some of your stuff that you've come up with, is like you want to let the player figure out who the bad guy is
Yeah.
based on their what they've done and what you present to the player
Mhm.
in the game. So I think our game is open to interpretation of who the
Definitely.
bad guy is. So
Yeah, I'm excited for people to play it and kind of
Yeah.
see how they interpret it, because I
Mhm.
think we're gonna see a lot of conflicting answers.
yeah,
So yeah, you guys will see pretty soon, hopefully.
yeah.
So all right,
Would you agree with that though, or
Yeah,
like, would you think that is something that you do?
I think so. I think the biggest thing is, like you said, it's like, we're going to talk about some honorable mentions, but some of the characters, like we were saying, like Ganon, it's like, I think Ganon is cool, but I would
Mhm.
never write Ganon into the story, because it's like, in my opinion, if you're going to have a villain that the main character is trying to get to or trying to defeat the whole time, there has to be a reason for it beyond the guy's just bad just to be bad.
Mhm.
Like, I know in real life, sometimes there's like psychopaths that are bad just because,
Right.
but I think the most interesting stories are always somebody that's defeating a bad guy,
Mhm.
and the bad guy had like almost a reason for why
Right.
he was being bad in the first place. And then
Exactly.
and then that thought of like, well, is the bad guy even at fault, or is it something that, was traumatic that changed him to think that way? And maybe you can kind of empathize a little bit more with the bad guy.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like the more like conflicted sort of characters. I think they just lead to more interesting stories as a whole.
Right.
But if a game is very gameplay centric, like, I don't know, like Sonic or Mario or whatever, it's fine to have a bad guy that's like bad just be bad, because it gives you an
Right.
objective at the end of the day.
Right. Right.
Like, I can't
More
imagine.
juvenile too for younger kids.
Sure.
And stuff, like.
But yeah, I can't even imagine, like, what could they do to Bowser, for example, that would make him even more
So
complicated?
that's an interesting thing to bring up, because in the movie, you saw the movie, right?
Yeah, yeah.
They really focus in on Bowser. Like,
Yeah.
Bowser is very front and center, and
Yeah.
you get to see a lot of Bowser's personality,
Yes.
which you never get to see in the
No.
games, because he's just like. But I think actually in Odyssey he's got a little more character to him, right?
Yeah.
And his kids are there.
But it's
and-
always like, I'm just trying to marry Princess Peach.
Right.
Get out of my way. But it's like, what's the logic in that? Like, this turtle man wants to marry a human? Like, what's
Yeah.
going on? So
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's like, yeah, you have to have this very like crazy leap in logic to even believe what his intentions are.
Right, exactly. And sometimes like the villain doesn't have to be a person. I feel like it can be a thought or an idea or something that characters have to fight against in order to survive, or I'm writing a story myself at the moment, and I don't necessarily have like a bad guy. I think that you can design a world that can be a villain in and of itself too. So I'm trying to use that as kind of like my idea.
Yeah, it's like almost like you were saying, like an ideology in itself can be the bad guy, and then you have people that just believe in the ideology that you can represent as your villains.
Right.
But so that's kind of interesting as well.
Yeah, and you can build characters to have that sense of morality where you're not sure like what their motive is. It's like they show you some good, they show you some bad, and you're just torn between liking the character and not liking the character. And at the end of the day, you have to come to a conclusion like, wow, like maybe at the end they do something so drastic that you're like, wow, I can't believe they did that.
Yeah.
And that makes that person a villain now.
Sure. Yeah.
But throughout the whole story, they're such a good character.
Yeah.
And you see so much good in them, and then at the end they make one very bad mistake that you're just like, I can't come back from that.
Yeah, and I think actually some of the characters on my list like kind of represent almost that, and that's what I was saying before. It sometimes it can come off as tropey, where it's like he was the bad guy all along, but I think it's more like you said, instead of it being like they have evil intentions from the beginning, they just have their own intentions, and then they're just sticking to their guns throughout the whole time. And when they really make a decision that's opposite of the characters' morals, I guess, then that's what defines them as the bad guy.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. They do something that you're just like, why did they do that?
Yeah.
Or maybe they're just misguided. Maybe
it.
they're just dumb.
Yeah.
They could just be a dumb character. I mean, they're unintelligent characters out there that they just make mistakes and they pay for them. So
yeah,
that could be it too.
Yeah, definitely. All right, cool. Let's go into our number 1 then.
All right.
I don't know what yours is gonna be.
You think I've covered all the ones that you think I would have covered?
I don't know. Yours is a lot like different than I would have thought.
Yeah. So my number 1 is gonna. Have you played this game, Heavy Rain?
Dude, I played some of it and then I just couldn't. I know you like all those games. I don't know what it is about those. I get kind of bored with them, if I'm being honest.
I can see why, but you're a father now, so maybe you will appreciate it more. But basically, the villain from that game is called the Origami Killer.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, and I just found his character to be super interesting. And I'm going to do my best to not spoil anything. Sure. But if you've played Heavy Rain and you beat it, and you'll probably agree with me that it was just an amazing experience. And a lot of the game, you're just pressing buttons like, square, circle, triangle. It was just like one of the only 2 PS3 games I owned.
Really?
Yeah. I had a PS3, but like that was like one of the very few games I had.
Yeah.
And what's really interesting about this character is so first of all, the reason why he's called the Origami Killer is because whenever he makes a kill, he leaves an origami piece around.
Okay.
So when people find the body, they usually find this origami there too. So they call him the Origami Killer, and they're trying to like basically pin down where he does his killings, but they can't seem to find like any correlation to anything. They just know that most of the kids are, I think all of them are kids, which is effed up as it is, but you just kind of, as you play through, he's basically like guiding you, the main character, and you, the main character, you also go through this bit of trauma where you lose your son, one of your sons, and you have these like blackouts where like you just forget where you are, and you start running off and you end up in some other place. You're like, shit, like where's my son?
Yeah,
you have to like go and find him. But what ends up happening is the Origami Killer captures your son. So you as the father, it's up to you to find the kid, find your kid, right? But what's interesting is, and this might be a spoiler, so if you don't want to hear this, maybe like fast forward a bit. But basically, like the villain, the Origami Killer, he basically had such a bad upbringing with like an alcoholic father and stuff that he thought that like no father would go to great lengths to save their child, and that's like his motive, is like he thinks that like under a certain amount of pressure and with odds being stacked up against you and with self-mutilation and all this other stuff, like no father will be able to like pass his test basically. So he puts all these fathers under this insane pressure and under these trials to save their son, to see if they'll actually go through with it.
Got it.
And you are basically the one that you're the final test, basically, right? So you kind of, as you go through the game, you go through all his trials, and he sends you these little creepy boxes with origamis in them, and
it reminds me of do you see Saw, the Saw franchise?
Saul Goodman.
Saw, like SAW. Did you see Saw?
I saw
You saw Saw?
No, actually I don't think I have, like the Jigsaw. Where you have to like escape the room or whatever.
Yeah.
No, I haven't really seen them, no.
Really?
Yeah.
I think those movies are really gory, but like they have a really insane story, and it's kind of the villain is kind of sort of similar in that respect, where it's like he's making the people do a test for a morality reason of his own like demented thinking, so that's really cool.
Yeah.
I do like stuff like, I think for that game in particular, it's like the gameplay that's just kind of,
I know you're more of a gameplay player.
It's one.
But it's one of those things where, if you really want to just experience a story, and but the thing is, like even with Detroit Become Human, like it's more than just clicking buttons. It's like analyzing.
You're
kind
of like a detective.
You play 3 different characters
Yeah.
in it, but you have
I'm
to
saying
know.
not even like you're acting like a detective, even if you're not specifically playing a detective, because you're having to like read people's like thoughts or like read how they're saying stuff, right?
Right. You have
interpret
to interpret people's what they're telling you, the way that they tell you.
Mm-hmm.
You have to like understand people's personalities and like what the right thing to say is at the right time.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you say the wrong thing at the like at a certain time, you might piss off that character.
Yeah.
And like in the background, there's like this like meter of like them liking you and not. So you basically just go down this path of like them not liking you, and then the next time you say something, he's like, dude, I told you the last time.
Sure.
And it kind of like builds. So it feels like a very like real relationship that you're building with these characters.
Yeah.
So you need to have the emotional intelligence, the EQ, to basically play through these games and get the result that you want.
Sure.
Because especially in Detroit, like they're made by the same company, by the way, Quantic Dream. It's basically the androids are trying to fight for justice, but there's obviously like peaceful ways and non-peaceful ways, right? So you have to talk your way through all of that.
Yeah.
And this game is similar, Heavy Rain. But it's not as controversial as like Detroit. It's not as like grand scale.
Got it.
It's between a father and the guy.
Yeah, it's like kind of obvious, like the bad guy's a bad guy sort of thing. That's interesting. Yeah, maybe I'll get that at some point.
It's just an experience,
No, I do. Yeah. I like the idea of it. It's like those types of games. I feel like sometimes I just start, and if I don't just commit to it, then I'm like, what am I doing? Who are these people again? So I should play through those.
All right, who's your number one?
Do you know who my number one is?
Sephiroth.
Yes.
I was like, Nick's gonna. I was telling Amanda on the way here. I was like, Nick's gonna pick at least 3 Final Fantasy games.
I tried so hard to keep it to like one Final Fantasy character, but
I know you. I was really sure you were gonna pick the guy from FF15.
Yeah. Okay. So we can talk about him after because he was like close to getting onto there, but like Sephiroth for sure is my number one. I actually think in terms of any media, personally, I think Sephiroth is the most interesting bad guy of all time. Just
Explain.
In general. It's hard for me to explain without going into spoilers.
Okay.
But at the in a very basic sense, man, it's like how much do I? It's like this is like a 25-year-old game, and this is something too. I know you're gonna play Rebirth eventually. This is something like you kind of learn at the very beginning of Rebirth, and you might already know this, but kind of like in Fear, like Sephiroth essentially is like an engineered person,
right?
And he's engineered from the cells of some like ancient alien person that they found on the planet, and that's what those are the cells that they infuse in all of the soldiers with the capital like Cloud, right? So they basically experiment on these people with these weird alien cells, and they like don't know what they like don't know what the implications of doing that are. And when Sephiroth understands that that's what happens to him, it makes him go mad, because originally he's never like nice guy or anything like that, but his backstory is he's just a soldier that fights for this army. He does his duty, whatever, and he like is just a guy,
Is he even alive in this series? Because I feel like, doesn't he die in Crisis Core? Or no?
Does he die?
Isn't he like a spirit in the first game?
He's like, this is again like
okay, is it spoilery?
It's extremely spoilery, and it's really weird. And even in the original, like the fans kind of have different interpretations of like who the guy is that's like walking around. Like
they must be connected together. That would be my theory.
What are connected?
Cloud and Sephiroth are connected through this ancient DNA or whatever it is.
I'm not gonna say one way or another. But it just, I don't know, it just leads for a very, very interesting villain when like he himself is a normal guy, but then later in life understands he's not who he thinks he is. So could you imagine being a grown-ass adult and all of a sudden you're told like you're not even a human being, essentially,
I'd be upset.
Well, I mean, think about it. Like, it's literally sit back 2 steps and be like, if somebody came up to you or you read you found out through data that you're not a human, you'd be like, what am I?
Yeah.
I need to find out more. And I would think I'd
be like, sick, I'm an alien.
I think any rational person would go down some sort of rabbit hole to like find out more about it. I mean, I even think with our own DNA, like people do those like 23andMe's and stuff like that. They're interested about their heritage, right? And Sephiroth like kind of goes down this path of really, really wanting to understand like what the meaning of everything is after his entire world gets shattered. So I feel like his motivation for being a bad guy, maybe it goes to kind of an extreme to a very, very like crazy point. But again, it's like what he ends up doing and blah, blah, blah. Like,
why is he called the One-Winged Angel? Is that something you can share, or is that having to do with his villain?
Dude, honestly, I'm trying to think about if it has anything to do more than his kind of design. Like one of his like forms or something like that. I think it's more, I think philosophically, symbolic? It's more symbolic in the sense that like, a two-winged angel is angelic, a one-winged angel is demonic. I see. You know what I mean?
Like and a fallen angel.
I think that's kind of the implication. Yeah. But dude, he's just his design, everything. I think it's the fact too that, and this is something
he does look badass. I mean, he's a cool character.
And it's like the fact that he's like good looking makes him scary. Right. You know what I mean? It's like, it's just like in any of those like Netflix documentaries, like it's always like the scariest guys are the ones that are like very trustworthy on the outside, right. And then you find out they're like some crazy serial killer or something. So I think it's for Sephiroth, it's like the whole package of his design, his motivation, his backstory,
his hotness,
all that leather, Yeah. But just like even just like, that is another one that I know, people say what they will about turn-based combat, but like fighting him at the end of the original, even fighting him in remake so far has been like freaking epic. Like that boss fight was really fun. And he's just, I don't know, dude. He's like one of those iconic villains. Like everybody knows that shot of him where he turns around and there's the fire around him. It's like, what's more badass than a dude just like walking through fire after he's just destroyed stuff, Yeah. So, yeah, he's man.
I always saw that clip growing up, and I was like, cool.
You're like,
I just never played FF7, but I was like, everyone was so hype about it.
If you play or when you play Rebirth, like that shot is within the first hour of the game. Like you'll know now, like the context for all of that, and that's what's cool about what they're doing with this trilogy now is they are really setting up Sephiroth's backstory. Because in the first game, I can imagine if you didn't play the original, you're like, who even is Sephiroth? They don't explain anything about him.
No, they don't.
And then you fight him and you're like, why am I even fighting him? That was a kind of a weird decision in my opinion. But like in this game, the first thing is a flashback. Like you immediately go into a flashback. So you're like getting to see like Sephiroth like from, what is it, like 5 years ago or whatever. And it breaks down the whole spinning out of control thing. It's so cool, dude.
Do you think fans would have been pissed off if you didn't fight Sephiroth at the end of the first one? Maybe that's why they did it.
I almost think hardcore fans would have been less pissed off if you didn't fight him, because it's just a weird decision. It's like, I know for the masses, they're like, oh, everybody that's never played Final Fantasy, they need to know that you're fighting Sephiroth at the end.
Right.
But it almost felt like unearned in a way.
It almost felt like it was like kind of goes back to what we were talking earlier, where it's like they didn't build up the character enough. They just put the villain in.
They didn't build him up at all. I mean, you just kind of see him walking through a couple hallways, and you're just like, "Is this guy?"
You just like see him go, "Ah!" And like randomly, like his face shows up.
Yep.
And Cloud's just like stun locked in for eternity until someone's like, "Cloud, you all right?" And then those like weird ghosts come, and like you're like, "What are these weird ghosts?" And then they like take you somewhere. Then you find out later that they're like not evil or something like that. It's weird. That's Final Fantasy for you, though. It's just odd.
I'm just thinking back to you being like, Sora from 365. I'm having a flashback. That was funny. Okay. All right. Maybe really quick we can do some like what do we call them, like notable mentions, some of these other types of villains. So you're bringing up Arden from FF15.
Yeah,
he's another one that like surprisingly has a really really cool backstory, and this is one that's kind of frustrating because again I know all the FF fans were kind of pissed that they didn't like add these into the main game, but Arden has a whole DLC for himself where you play as him and you learn his whole backstory, and that is what really made him insanely interesting. He was another character that at the beginning you're kind of like, oh, is he like my friend, whatever, but it's like they wouldn't have designed him to be so badass if he was just like the nice guy, you know. He was totally the villain from the beginning, but he has like a weird familial connection with Noctis, and it's that it's and he's like almost like immortal essentially. So it's like these generations of essentially jealousy between him and one of Noctis's ancestors, that now he's coming after the current king, which is Noctis.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So it's like that's something I kind of spoiled, but it's like unless you play the DLC, you literally wouldn't even know any of this stuff. So, dude,
I like this character design. I thought it was really cool.
He's so cool, man.
Yeah.
His whole like mannerism cool. And everything.
He's just like a cool guy, and you're like, oh, this guy's kind of friendly.
Yeah.
But he just has these like evil intentions.
Yeah. So yeah, he's a good one. And yeah, we talked about like I had on my notes like Bowser and Ganon and stuff like that. Do you have any other ones off the top of your head that you were like?
Man, I had trouble honestly with some of these because some of them felt like anime villains. Like for example, like Yu-Gi-Oh, Pegasus. He's just such a good villain. You've probably seen him before. He's got white hair and he's got like the golden eye.
Oh yeah.
He basically lost his wife to like a sickness. And he's the one who created the card. He like brought the card game to life.
Oh, cool.
But basically they use these magical items to they play like these shadow games with these magical Millennium items that they have, and he's just like a really cool villain because at the end of the day he's like not a bad guy, but he just like has this like vengeance that he's seeking because he feels like his wife was taken too soon. So he basically has this eye that he can cheat with. He can play games and just prove that he's the best, and he's the creator and he's the best. So he just starts stealing people's souls and stuff, and he takes the main character's grandpa's soul like right off the bat. And so that's the whole motive of catching up to him and beating him. But he's in a lot of games for Yu-Gi-Oh! So that's why I wanted to use him, but at the end of the day, he's
not like a video gamey, villain. Yeah, because like there's some other games too, like the Joker from Arkham Asylum. He was a good villain, but it was like he's kind of has the same motives as like in the comics and in the movies and stuff like that.
Yeah,
but go ahead.
Another one is Shadow the Hedgehog. Yeah, Shadow is just a cool character.
He's cool.
And he was created as a lab. You know, he's just like created in a lab, right? But he basically it's almost the same thing as like Sephiroth, where he's just like created and he's like, what is my purpose?
Like those existential crisis kind of mentalities are pretty interesting for characters.
And I think he's just a cool all-around cool, like he's not a villain, but he is kind of a villain in a sense. So he hangs out with the bad boys. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
looking through some other like games, it's like I feel like a lot of, like we were saying kind of earlier in the podcast, video game villains can like be hit or miss, and a lot of times they're usually just like not shoehorned in, but like you're like, oh, okay, I guess this is like who I'm fighting or whatever. And then you get into like Souls games where there's a lot of villains, but like you have to like look through like 3 encyclopedias to even understand what the heck is going on in the game. You know,
I just thought of a cool villain from Dragon Quest XI that I forgot about. I can't remember his name, but he's basically like the head knight, and he's always trying to catch you and like defeat you. But then like you end up like befriending him after he figures out like your intentions and stuff like that. But if I could remember his character, I would say. But
those are other games too where it's like the villains, the big bad villains, are always like, oh, I'm trying to take over the world sort of villains. And I know some Final Fantasy games have that kind of stuff, but I think that's what, again, like drawing me to that franchise so much is a lot of the villains are actually pretty deep. And it's like you have a reason to like continue your quest and try to fight them and defeat them at the end of the game. It's either like they're trying to destroy, I mean, it's usually, they're trying to destroy the earth. And 9 times out of 10 too, you're always trying to kill God because, it's a Japanese RPG and that's like just what you do,
Yeah.
You open chests and you kill God at the end of the game.
Right.
So
another honorable mention, I guess, is from Persona 5. There's a couple villains in there's quite a number of villains in there. I don't want to go into detail on the main villain, but
you know who? Sorry, really quick. You know who was a good one in that? It was the first bad guy, the teacher,
Kamoshida.
Right?
Yeah.
The like skinny guy with the poofy hair.
Yeah.
And he's
the gym
like
teacher. Yeah,
he's like a creep to the girls, right? Yeah, like that was really cool because it was like a very outside the box kind of villain. Some like you wouldn't think, like he's not trying to take over the world. He's just like an effed up dude, and it's like you end up going into his mind essentially, and you defeat like the evil parts of him. And when you defeat him, right, doesn't he kind of resolve? He doesn't resolve, but he has guilt.
He has guilt, and he goes and tells like the school board like all
that's
this
right.
stuff.
Does he kill him?
No, I don't think so.
Are you sure? I think one of
the girls that he abuses kills herself.
Oh, that's right.
And that's part of the arc of the story.
Right.
That's actually a really good villain.
Right?
Kamoshida,
Yeah. Dude, that game was amazing.
There's a lot of villains in that game. And
yeah.
like it's done so well. Like just like one villain after another. They go into detail of like each character. Like each character has like a dilemma that they face with these like obviously in the first boss is An Takamaki. She basically is like the blonde girl.
Yeah.
She is abused in a way by Kamoshida. So every character kind of has something to go through with these villains, and it's up to you to kind of go into their palace.
Yeah.
And resolve that. So yeah, a lot of great villains in Persona 5.
Yeah.
And what's it called? Futaba, her mom, was a villain because she like basically like abused her. Oh, she's the nerdy girl.
Yeah.
With the redhead.
Wait,
nerdy
I thought
girl.
she scared her. Wait, was that something you find out later?
You go into like the pyramid that's like her palace.
Yeah.
And you defeat like the evil like version of her mother that's like basically putting her down all the time.
Oh, that's right.
So
too.
Yeah, a lot of like cool villains. So many. Even like the last boss, he's not the last boss, but the president basically right off the bat accuses you of like he basically is assaulting a woman and like blames it on you basically.
That's right. That's from the very beginning of the game.
From the very beginning. So you basically are like exiled from your family and sent off to be in another city because you're framed for this.
That's right.
From this guy.
Oh, dude, that game. I like want to play that game again. It was so long. And you never played Royal either.
I have it. I actually started playing it on. I'm playing it on very hard. So I'm trying to beat it.
Maniac, dude. Why would you play a 150-hour long RPG on the hardest difficulty?
I just want to see how hard it is. Like if I can beat it.
You're gonna lose your mind, man. Because also like you thought Persona was long. Like there's an entire semester after the end of the game. Yeah.
In Royal?
Yeah.
Oh snap. Well, I'll have fun with it, I guess. It'll be a slow burn.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, why don't we really quickly just kind of go over what do we think would be, as developers, what would make the perfect video game villain?
Okay. I guess I'll start.
If you had to like invent one from scratch.
A perfect video game villain that I invent from scratch? Definitely somebody that has some kind of troubled upbringing, or had some traumatic event in their life, because I don't think any villain could really be a true villain without some type of purpose, whether it be some type of trauma or some other type of resentment in their past. So definitely a character that has a past, but maybe you don't know the past right away.
Sure.
Maybe it's something that you sort of learn as you go and becomes more apparent the more you interact with this character. And it should also be a character that does good things from time to time, because I feel like those characters are conflicted.
Sure.
And you have some sort of remorse for them because you're like, wow, this character did something so good, but at the end of the day, they're just, like I said earlier, they did one bad thing that you just couldn't recover from.
Yeah.
And that sort of set them on the path of villain. So, obviously you fight them. Maybe they have like different phases that you battle. Like, like the first time you fight them, they're like weak, but then they like kind of grow stronger as you go, and they unlock this newfound power that they're searching for, and throughout the whole story, they finally get it, and they turn into this like monster or something like that.
Definitely.
Or they're just like a badass swordsman or something like that. Yeah. So that's my idea of a good villain.
Yeah. Oh man, that made me think about what I think makes the perfect boss fight, but we can talk about that in another one. And also, it did really quickly remind me of there's a new villain in Royal. There's a new character. There's multiple new characters, actually. Dude, oh my God. It gets crazy, man. When I started researching what is in... Because I played Royal first and beat it. When I started researching what's in Royal that's not in the original, I was like, oh my God, this is like... It feels like they changed the entire game to make this even work.
Right.
So I'm excited to see what you think about that.
That's cool.
But yeah, if I had to design a villain from scratch, I think definitely they have to be like good looking, because in my opinion that makes them like creepier. They have to be like cool, right? Like you want to fight somebody where you're like, this guy's badass, but they gotta be hot, but you still have to defeat them,
Right.
And I think, like you said, you definitely want to be able to empathize with their struggles. And I think what else makes an interesting villain is one that they're setting up for you throughout the game as much as possible, or at least like early-ish on in the experience, because I always think it's kind of weak when you get to the last arc of the game, and then all of a sudden you're like, this is the villain, and it's like, if it's gonna be like that, what has been interesting in the past is I've played games where you're following a character and they're connected somehow to what becomes the overarching villain, and then you're like surprised. So that's kind of cool. But I like more grounded stories generally, like not so like I'm trying to take over the world. It's like I'm trying to do a very specific sort of thing.
Right.
Yes. So like
an intricate like motive.
An intricate motive.
Trying to take over the world.
Or even just like a motive that's having to do with like specifically what's happening in the plot line. You know what I mean? Because when you get to take over the world, it's like that could be any game, any world, whatever. But when it's like we were bringing up a DMC, like one of the villains was like, I'm going to use the energy drinks in the world to infest like demons onto the people, whatever. It's like that's a very specific thing that the designer thought of to work with the game world.
Here's an interesting idea.
Yeah.
So all these games where there's like the villain wants to take over the world.
Yeah.
There should be a game where the world was just taken over.
Ooh.
And then now it's like you're born as a bad guy that becomes a good guy.
Ooh.
And then now it's like you have to undo the world being taken over. So it's like the bad guys won.
Yeah,
finally.
yeah.
It's like the world got taken over.
And maybe you're like part of the bad guys clan to begin with, and then you kind of defect because you realize that the world before was in a better spot.
Exactly. Travelers Refrain too.
That's a really cool idea. All right. Well, do you have anything else?
That's it for now.
Yeah. I think on that note, let's wrap this up. Thank you so much for what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say, I guess I wanted to give another honorable mention to Sea of Stars.
Okay.
Some cool bosses in there for sure. It's still fresh for me, so I will say that it does have cool bosses, of course, and villains. But I'm gonna wait until a later video where I can talk about it more once I've digested it more.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, go ahead.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us again. Don't forget to check out Traveler's Refrain on Steam, where you can wishlist now. That would really, really help us out. And also, please like and subscribe on YouTube. Subscribing helps you see the videos right when they come out. And we've been posting these weekly. So hopefully you guys will subscribe and see some new content every week from us. So until next time, thanks, guys. We will see you later.
See you.